Welcome to CinemaSpection. I'm Tim.
I'm Agatha.
And it's a full-blown 4-alarm holiday emergency as we wrap up presents, electrocute the cat, and join the Jelly of the Month Club with the discussion of a modern Christmas classic. It's National Lampoon's Christmas Vacation from 1989.
After vacationing across America and throughout Europe,
Take it, Russ.
this holiday season, the Griswolds are going to play it safe.
Clark, we're stuck under a truck.
Oops. They're staying at home.
I give you the Griswold family Christmas tree.
Hope you're not getting sap all over your sweater, Clark.
All Clark wants is a quiet, old-fashioned Christmas.
Sorry. Got a little knot here. Can work on that.
What he's going to get is the gift that keeps on living.
Merry Christmas.
His family.
We didn't come to impose.
Oh, hell, there's plenty of room.
Do you sleep with your brother? Do you know how sick and twisted that is, Mom? Well, I'm sleeping with your father.
Have you got a kiss for me?
You better take a rain check on that, Art. He's got lip fungus they ain't identified yet.
But no holiday could ever be more deeply touching.
We were gonna call, but Eddie wanted to make it a surprise.
If I woke up tomorrow with my head sewn to the carpet, I wouldn't be more surprised than I am right now.
So genuinely moving.
Can I refill your eggnog for you? Drive you out to the middle of nowhere? Leave you for dead?
More truly uplifting.
Can I show you something?
I was just browsing.
Or more down to earth.
Merry Christmas!
If Santa is smart, he'll stay well clear of this joint. It's a death trap.
Than Christmas with the Griswolds.
Everybody come on, quick, look at the lights!
They want you to say grace.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America.
This year, let Chevy Chase light up your holidays. National Lampoon's Christmas Vacation.
That thing had 9 lives. She just spent them all.
Following their disastrous trips across the U.S. and Europe, family man Clark Griswold has grand plans for a holiday vacation at home with his wife Ellen and kids Audrey and Rusty as he sets out to have the greatest family Christmas ever. Inviting various relatives to stay in the Griswold household, Clark's dream of a peaceful Yuletide season quickly goes astray. With misadventures including getting a monstrously oversized Christmas tree, the perils of hanging excessive Christmas lights, a pitched battle with an aggressive squirrel, and the gross hijinks of his odious cousin Eddie, the gathering quickly becomes a disaster. Will the mayhem finally push Clark over the edge and destroy his indomitable Christmas spirit? As usual, we'll be discussing Christmas Vacation in detail, so if you haven't seen the film and wish to remain unspoiled, we recommend watching the film before listening to the rest of this episode. Christmas Vacation was released by Warner Brothers on December 1st, 1989. It was shot on a budget of $25 million and made $73.3 million at the box office. This was a really decent-sized hit at the time.
It was also during the holiday season. It came out on the 1st, so people had time to watch it. Plus, we're talking about 89 when films would go into the theater and actually play for a few weeks.
That's such a crazy idea.
I know.
Also, it was a Christmas season where there wasn't really much else. The only other holiday movie that season was Prancer. And
Prancer was rough.
I thought it was cute, but I mean, it's definitely a kid's movie, so they're definitely serving different audiences. This is the third in the National Lampoon's Vacation film series and is based on John Hughes' short story, Christmas 59. So, Agatha, what are your experiences with Christmas Vacation, but also the National Lampoon's Vacation series in general?
I'm the worst because I've still not seen the first 2 National Lampoon movies. I got partway through the first one, and it wasn't that the movie was bad, but I just did not have the patience to watch it at the time. And Christmas Vacation, I did not see in the theater. We actually didn't go to the movie theater that often, but I definitely watched it way too many times when it came out on VHS, when it was playing on HBO. So it's been in my life since I was about 10 years old.
For me, I remember seeing European Vacation a lot because it was on HBO in a constant cycle. And it's not the best one. It's okay. It's fine. It took me a while to finally get to the original Vacation. And that was one of those ones I'd see a lot on TV, hacked to pieces, and then finally saw it uncut. And this one, I also didn't see it in the movies. I remember it playing. I remember it was a big deal with all of my classmates. They thought it was funny. And at the time, I was a little less into comedy. So I was just like, yeah, whatever. And I caught up with it also on HBO, and this is, I think, my favorite of the Vacation movies. Like, the first one's really good, but there's something about this one that just really, really works. I think it's not mean-spirited, which is a little strange to find.
Are you sure?
No, honestly, And we'll get into comparing it to the short story. It's not as mean-spirited as it could have been, because there's a lot of moments where this movie stops and has a really sweet little sincere moment hidden in the middle of it that I find is really interesting. And I don't feel like the other movies really accomplish that very much. So let's get into that original short story. John Hughes was approached to write another one of these. He had nothing to do with European Vacation and kind of disavows that one. And he didn't want to write a sequel because he doesn't like sequels, and he thought this series was just Chevy Chase vehicles at this point. But because he had written the original short story back in the 80s, he agreed because he at least had something to base it on. And that short story was published in the December 1980 issue of National Lampoon's magazine. And I will admit, it has some of the beats of this in terms of some of the incidents, but tonally, it just feels very different.
It does. There was a more chaotic feel to the short story. Events were building on each other, so it felt frenetic in a way that this did not, especially because the movie is taking place over, 15 days?
Something like that,
Something like that. It may have even just been the 12 days. I wish I'd paid attention. I think the first day was the 12th.
I think so.
Yeah, I wish I paid attention to the movie we're talking about. Oh my God. I paid quite a bit of attention. I just didn't notice that detail.
Part of it for me is also, the movie is clearly Clark's story, and it's from his point of view for the most part, but the short story is more from the stand-in for Rusty. So we're seeing everything from his point of view and a little removed. And Clark comes across as a lot more grumpy and kind of unwell. And there's the addition of this Thai college student that the grandparents bring in, who is clearly the forerunner for Long Duck Dong that John Hughes would put in his 16 Candles. And he's a terrible stereotype.
But he's a stereotype not of a Thai person, but of a stereotypical Asian person. So there's a lot of broken English that we read as racist Japanese
or Chinese
a lot of taking of photographs, which is why I went to Japanese initially, because of that massive stereotype of Japanese tourists
and ripping off the family, stealing the silverware and all that kind of stuff.
Right.
It's just like gross.
It was not a great character, and I didn't feel like it added anything to the story.
I totally agree. And things like, instead of a squirrel, it's a bird, but that is pretty much from the story. The whole thing with the Christmas star that in the case of the story turns out to be a plane and not the light at the sewage treatment plant, which I actually think is a lot funnier.
I do too.
There's a lot of little bits there and even a couple bits of direct dialogue. Aunt Bethany in particular is almost straight out of the original story.
But there was a dog instead of a cat.
Yeah.
So there were some changes that were for the best. I think it was for the best that they changed Aunt Bethany's dog into Aunt Bethany's cat.
And it's basically just like, aren't the holidays horrible? Isn't having your family around for the holidays horrible? And that's kind of the point of the story, and that's it. And I just feel like every change they made in bringing it to film was a vast improvement. Now, let's talk about it as a Christmas movie. So we've had Christmas movies on the religious aspect and, you know, the goodwill toward men thing that we get in Scrooge, and even Christmas Story covered the materialistic part of it. And I think this might be the definitive one in terms of Christmas as a time for dealing with your family.
I can see that. I also think it's a warning of nostalgia, a warning against it. Like, don't look back at your perfect childhood Christmases because they were not perfect. You were a child and your family was shielding you from just how much work goes into it and how much goes wrong. I mean, from a children's perspective, and I know we both have this, we had good memories of being a child and you get presents and there's food and you kind of don't care about the family part of it. And you certainly have nothing to do with getting ready for parties. So I think this is sort of a takedown and an adult look at a childhood Christmas. Plus the danger of attempting perfection.
And that's something I definitely relate to. I feel like when December starts to come along and the hype machine for Christmas starts, you feel that sort of pressure of, oh, got to do this, got to get all the presents, got to watch all the Christmas specials, got to decorate, got to make it as Christmassy as possible so I can get into the spirit. And that's come up a lot more over the past few years for me, that's just sort of that weird Yuletide pressure. And I feel like Clark he doesn't always seem to feel his pressure so much as just this weird self-obsession with getting it all right.
Yeah, it's an internal pressure, absolutely. Clark is the poster child for wanting to create these perfect memories. And he says for his children, but he is a very selfish character. And this is all for himself so he can feel good about himself.
And I also feel like, going back to the nostalgia thing, in some level, righting the wrongs of previous Christmases. And we get little bits of all the different things. We get a little bit of the shopping experience. We get a lot of the decorating experience, even sledding, which I remember when I was a kid was usually a big thing that happened in December. And well, not so much now. It's usually not until like January or February that it's cold enough. And I haven't gone sledding in years and would probably break my neck if I tried at this point.
But at every turn, every event that happens, and this movie is interesting because it is vignettes, but it's a string of vignettes that form a story, which has arcs and such. And yeah, you could argue those are scenes and you could argue that those are sequences. But for this movie, it's vignettes. There's the attempt to try something grandiose and have it be perfect, and then it goes wrong. And that's the whole movie. The perfection attempt, how it goes wrong, on to the next attempt at perfection.
Yeah, every scene, even if it's not like building the overall plot, it's reflecting the character, especially of Clark, and how he takes things a step too far. Mm-hmm. Even little things like trying to help out Eddie with Christmas for the kids, and we see that blows up in his face when Eddie's like, all right, here's a list of stuff, buy all these, you know?
Right.
Everything he tries to make this the perfect Christmas for everybody just kind of backfires on him. There's also the look at this in terms of being a sequel, and that it's part of the Vacation series. But it's interesting that this one, more than any of them, feels kind of standalone.
I did not feel I missed anything by not seeing the first two. So I agree, it works as a standalone quite well. I'm not sure if I could have accepted it as part of a trilogy, because from the first half, since I'm such an expert on National Lampoon, from the first half of the film I did see before the Christmas Vacation, tonally, they don't feel the same in a way. Yes, there's the attempt for perfection and there's what goes wrong, but it didn't hang together, that first half, as much as I feel this does. And some of that may be my own nostalgia, where I'm looking back at it as a film that's been in my life for like 30 years now. That's crazy.
I know, frightening, isn't it? I think you're right. I mean, it actually has the same episodic structure you were talking about, in that, okay, we move on to a new place, here's something weird. We move on to a new place, here's something weird. Where this one, though, has the same recurring characters, the other family members and all the people along the way that stick around. And I think that's a big part of what makes it work. A little more than the other ones did. I did notice watching it, though, there's a lot of hallmarks, little things that they recreate from the first movie. The car jump in the opening scene where it does that ridiculous jump happens very late in the original Vacation in the middle of the desert. Clark having his freak out and punching like the Santa kind of reflects something that happens at the end of the first one, or his giant insane rant does that too. Even to the point of, cops showing up and nearly arresting everybody. There's a lot of little particular things that echo through the two.
Okay, so now I need to walk it back and say that I did miss things, but I didn't know I did until right now. So it seems like Clark has learned nothing.
Absolutely.
He just keeps doing the same shit, and we can assume that he will continue to do the same shit from now on.
We get a few little things in this one that sort of hint at that, like Clark having that line of, when have I ever overdone anything? And Rusty giving that look like, really? Or a lot of Ellen treating him with kid gloves because she knows how he is and how he's going to overdo things, and that's just the way it is.
Can I say, she's just way too good for him.
They're all way too good for him.
Yes, his children and his wife are long-suffering.
And there are a few specific references to the original one. The Wally World mugs with the
antlers.
Marty Moose. Yeah, that's a specific reference to the amusement park they were going to in the first one. And Cousin Eddie actually mentions his other children who were in the first one and aren't in this one. Little things like that, little touches, or even the present that he finds buried in the attic that's for like Mother's Day 1983, which was the year that movie came out. So just a couple little things hinting at that past. I also noticed that there's a lot of connections between this and It's a Wonderful Life.
Oh, absolutely. This movie is a spin on It's a Wonderful Life. I mean, it's also a spin on A Christmas Carol.
Yeah.
There's a lot going on around his folly.
We have the movie playing on TV in one scene. We have Frank Capra III, the grandson of the original Frank Capra, serving as the second assistant director, I think.
Part of me feels like that's a coincidental connection, but I still love it.
The Newell post gag where he chainsaws off the post is a reference to that loose one in It's a Wonderful Life that bugs George Bailey for most of the movie until he's like, oh, I love you, you loose post, that's wonderful. Even Clark facing this financial crisis that threatens to pretty much upend his life.
But he did to himself. And this is the funny part where it changes from It's a Wonderful Life, because Clark has buried himself financially by putting a down payment on a dream. And this is very Clark. And George Bailey had nothing to do with losing that money. So he's taken on the punishment of someone else's error.
Yeah, it's like George Bailey spends that whole movie living for other people, and Clark
lives for himself.
He acts like he's living for other people, but yeah, it's really kind of this ego trip for himself. Absolutely.
He wants to be seen as putting on this wonderful, grandiose party. He wants to be the perfect dad, the perfect husband, and he fails all the way across. And I'm not saying that he's the worst person in the world. I think in a way he's very real.
We've known some people who kind of go over the top in terms of parties and celebrations and things.
Through my life, there have been many people who aspire to those perfect holidays where everything is just beautiful, could be taken as photographs for the inside of a card, just ridiculous things where, certain people were not allowed to come to the parties, not because there was anything wrong with them, but because they didn't fit the aesthetic.
Oh, that's creepy. That's awful.
I hate to... Yes, this was family. Big surprise. So the messiness of Christmas is, I don't know, I just think it's something to be celebrated. Because families are messy.
Yeah.
And Clark is the opposite, where he does want that perfection. And I will argue, toward the end, he feels like he has done this perfect Christmas, despite all of the follies. And I know we're going to get into that much later. But it's a false ending because we know Clark is going to do the exact same thing for New Year's Eve.
And Valentine's Day, yes. And 4th of July, and any other occasion you can think of.
Any other monumental day must be perfect.
In terms of, you brought up Christmas Carol, I do feel like what happens with the boss and Eddie is almost a bizarre Ghost of Christmas Present.
Exactly. That's exactly what it is. Trying to save a buck at Christmas and having Clark as a stand-in for Bob Cratchit is an interesting way to look at it when Clark has a house and a family and a car and he has all of these wonderful things, but we are to understand, he's poor and put upon because his boss can't remember his name and he doesn't get a Christmas bonus.
And because he's put himself into financial straits because he wanted a little bit more in terms of the perfect family environment.
Right. And this doesn't take away from how horrible his boss is, but it does give us a different perspective on the 80s version of poverty.
The 80s version of what middle class was at the time. Yeah.
Yeah.
So let's talk about the director, Jeremiah Chechik. This was his first feature film. He had done a whole series of music videos and very popular commercials, and he actually became a hot item in Hollywood because Stanley Kubrick saw his commercials and called it the best American filmmaking at the time.
Okay, what was the commercial?
I don't know. I'm trying to find out which one it is specifically. I've been I couldn't get details on what commercial it was. I'm just going to look up a bunch of his, but apparently Kubrick thought, that's amazing. Oh, of course, being Kubrick, it could be that he was just kind of having a laugh at everybody and just saying it just to mess with people, and it worked out really well for this guy. All of a sudden, all the studios were after him, and he was at Warner Brothers because he wanted to do a movie about the Apollo Theater, and he was going to be this low-budget little film, and Warner Brothers kept building it up, and eventually they're like, well, before you do this, why don't you do this? And they threw Christmas Vacation at him. He was interested. He also was there because the original director was going to be Chris Columbus.
Oh, that makes sense.
And he had started production. He actually shot some of the second unit footage we see in the movie of downtown Chicago right before the shopping scene. But he had a couple meetings with Chevy Chase and just could not get along with him. And he figured, if I sign on for this is just going to be hell. No, and he stepped aside.
I have heard that through the years, Chevy Chase is challenging to work with for many reasons.
Yeah. So Hughes felt bad and actually said, well, here, I'll give you this, and gave him the script for Home Alone. And that worked out pretty damn well for Chris Columbus in the end.
Yes, it did.
Chechik apparently got along okay with Chevy Chase, signed on. And he found that John Hughes was actually very hands-off. He gave him the script. I think he was overseas somewhere, and he would just tell him, all right, if you have any trouble with the studio, just have them talk to me. And Chechik would go to the studio and like, if you have a problem with this, talk to Hughes. They would call Hughes, and Hughes just wouldn't pick up. And the studio would just give Chechik what he wanted for the most part. In terms of how he made the movie, on the commentary, he talks about how he wanted to shoot it kind of like an older comedy from like the 40s or 50s. Very simple setups, not too complex. And I think that's a really good choice. It works really well. It makes it, oddly enough, not dated at all. Like, he's not trying to be overly stylish. It's just presents the scenes and the actors going through their lines as simply as possible, and that's it.
The only thing I find that dates the film, besides the fact that there are no cell phones or flat screen TVs or anything that just did not exist at the time, are sound effects like the horns that go whoa, when something
that
funny
boom
happens.
Noise that comes up. Yeah.
Right. So exactly. There are notes where it's like, but ching.
Yeah.
And that dates it a little bit, I think.
And that might be a little bit of that older style of comedy too, because that is something I could imagine in a movie from like the 50s or something like that. I will say he does add a couple stylish bits with use of handheld, specifically in those two scenes when the grandparents show up, and especially the police raid at the end where all of a sudden it looks like a Lethal Weapon movie for a second. Mm-hmm. And I think those are really well done.
Especially, in my opinion, when the parents show up, this chaos of people literally invading your space, even though you've welcomed it grudgingly, they are invading. And I know we've both experienced this, and I think it might be a universal experience when you have family over your house and your privacy is null at that point. You know your family is going to go through your medicine cabinet, and if you leave them alone in your bedroom to put down their coats, someone's going through your drawers. So it is a storming of your house.
But also that you haven't seen them in a while. You've just given the hug and all of a sudden they're filling you in on everything that's happened in the last however long it's been since you've seen them.
Yes, all you want is for them to come in and settle down, maybe get a drink, and then you can start talking. Yeah. Like, let's ease into this, please. I don't want to hear about your mole.
And Chechik, you can see it's handheld, but it's not just like cameraman following the action. It's a little extra shakier than it needs to be on purpose. And I think that's a really nice touch there.
And you can feel the cameraman moving through the scene to pick up certain points. Mm-hmm. And it may be that the director said, hey, I want you to make sure you are with these characters as this is happening. And it works really well. And I think it is a precursor to the handheld work that we get with like Best in Show.
Yeah, the Christopher Guest sort of improvised
exactly
stuff, yeah.
Yes. So they're improvising and the camera's moving through the characters and picking up little bits,
and we're getting these insular conversations sometimes. Like in one case, one of the grandparents is complaining about the other one and she's like, shh, stop it. And it's like this conversation's happening while that person that they're complaining about is like 2 feet away,
yes,
having a whole different conversation. Yeah. Ironically, with the Chevy Chase thing, Chechik said he got along fine with Chevy Chase, but he fought a lot with Beverly D'Angelo during shooting. Yeah, I guess they made up afterward because they're both on the commentary for the movie, but I have trouble imagining that. But all right, so let's talk about Chevy Chase.
More than we already have.
More than we ever have, because he is kind of the central figure of the movie. And it bums me out that all these stories have come out about how difficult he is to work with and how nasty he can be to co-stars, because I got to admit, especially watching this, he is a really brilliant comedic actor.
He is. I wouldn't necessarily call him charismatic, but he's compelling.
And he pulls off something as this character that I find really amazing and kind of hard to figure out how he does it. He plays him as both a buffoon that we can laugh at, but then he can flip it around and have scenes where he's kind of the caustic smartass who's making fun of somebody else who's even more ridiculous.
Right.
And he manages to walk that line, and that's really, really tricky.
I think a lot of that comes down to the supporting characters and how they're written. I'm especially thinking of Cousin Eddie.
Right.
Who is down on his luck and looks the sort of stereotypical white trash part. And that's someone that Clark can feel superior to. So financially, and I'd say status-wise, we have Clark's boss, then Clark in the middle class, and Cousin Eddie in the low class. And you can see how each tier treats the other like shit.
But we also see a little bit of it in the workplace, like when he's dealing with his boss's underlings.
Right.
That great little hymn, Merry Christmas, kiss my ass, kiss his ass.
It's one of my favorite moments in cinema history, honestly.
And not in the script. I don't know if that's something Chase improvised on the spot, but it's the kind of comedy he's really good at. That sort of just grumbling, kind of under the breath insult towards somebody. He's so good at that. And that we see him in the workplace, and other than the scenes with his boss, he's actually seems semi-competent. Like, he knows his stuff. We actually find out what he does. He's like a food additive designer, which is a weird occupation.
Love it. I love it, and I'm gonna tell you why.
Okay, go for it.
Because he speaks specifically of a non-nutritional varnish for food, and he's in advertising. So this is all fake. He's creating a perfect veneer over something that cannot be invaded by a changing agent, in this case, milk or liquid. So in a sense, what he has created is a microcosm of the Christmas he wants to create, something that has a varnish on it that cannot be tainted by anything going around. So you can imagine that this is just how he lives his life. He's perpetually trying to create perfect memories, even for his cereal.
That is actually really brilliant. And working in the food industry like that, where it's just like, it looks good enough.
Yes.
Yeah.
If it looks good enough, it doesn't matter what it tastes like, because that advertising veneer is there. And the point is for you to not enjoy the food, but to enjoy the illusion of what that food represents.
I will say, in addition to just the kind of buffoon, smartass dichotomy that Chase has, Clark is interesting in that he can be really gross. I mean, incredibly sleazy.
Yes, but I mean, oh God, as I get older, I'm like, aren't we all? Aren't we all a bit gross?
I kind of had the same, observation here and there. He's not as bad as in the first Vacation, where he's a lot closer to adultery than he is in this one.
Right.
But still, he's kind of gross. And yet at the same time, he can flip around and have a couple scenes where it really feels like there is this sweet sincerity to what he's trying to do. Like the scene with Ruby Sue, where he's trying to cheer her up about Christmas and promising, no, Santa will come and he'll give you presents and it's going to be great. Yeah, there's the ego thing on some of the Christmas stuff, but that scene right there is a really nice, cute scene.
It's earnest, but it's still him trying to create a perfect memory for someone. It just so happens that in that moment, he's being sweet and he's talking to a child who doesn't understand Santa isn't real yet, but has never had the kind of Christmases that Clark has had. So he wants to create this for these children. And you're right. It is very sweet. It's very sincere. It's well-meaning, even though it is also kind of a dangerous tack to take with someone else's children.
And even to things that were different in the script, like in the script, when he finds out that Ellen's parents are coming, he's like, ugh. And in the movie, he's like, no, I'm happy. This is what I want. I want this Christmas with everybody.
I don't think so at all. I think it's one of those like, yeah, sure. That's great. Let's have this happen. Great family Christmas.
I think he means it in the moment. Once they show up, his opinion changes a little bit. But I think in the abstract, he really does want all these family members, even on her side, and even ones he can't get along with, to show up because he thinks it's going to be great. It's not until the reality hits that he starts to be like, oh God. You're right. That whole sense of that he has this nostalgia about these Christmases, and we see it when he's watching the home videos, that he just is seeing the sweet, nice things about it.
Right. He's seeing it from the child perspective, because the parents are always going to be filming children on Christmas or snow or, something happy. They're not going to save film of fighting. So he gets to relive selected memories.
Yeah, to try to improve on them and to make his Christmas what the films represent rather than what the reality was.
And even better.
I did read the script, and it's interesting how many lines and speeches are actually verbatim. Like his rant about his boss is word for word from the original script.
Which is impressive.
It's really impressive, yeah.
It's rattled off so fast and so naturally. And I will give Chevy Chase that. He did a fantastic line reading.
To be fair, he actually the other actors had signs on their neck with parts of the speech, so you could see he kind of looks left and right here and there as he's giving it to all of them. He's reading off cue cards all over the set and all over them.
That's a brilliant way of handling it.
Yeah, and it works really well. I mean, I couldn't recite that speech without some kind of cue like that. But there is a lot that is definitely just Chevy Chase sort of riffing and doing little things, even sometimes just to his reactions. The way he looks at Randy Quaid, the little dismissive shake of his head at things, that is so Chevy Chase.
I know we're specifically talking about Chevy Chase right now, but I think that all of the characters had wonderful moments of facial expression and body movement. I'm not sure how much of it is blocking for the body movements, but you can pick out one character, follow them through the entire time they're on screen, and they appear human in behavior. There's just these little quirks.
On that note, I want to move on, if we're all set on Chevy Chase.
I think so.
To speak about who I think is kind of the secret MVP of this movie, Beverly D'Angelo.
Oh, she is.
She does not get enough credit for how goddamn funny she is in this.
She plays the straight man, but she does it while still being broad.
Well, it's funny. I was going to say a lot of her comedy is a lot more subtle.
She's not as grandiose as Clark is, but She still brought lots of big eye rolls and biting line readings.
But a lot of times she's doing it alongside Chaser. He's doing something big and she's just doing this expression in the background that says so much about their character and all the things they've been through. Just this sort of, oh my God, here we go again.
Well, in Marriage, it's one of those moments of, I'm just going to let this be because anything I have to input right now will be either dismissed or will escalate the situation. So pardon me while I go in the other room and just handle my moment. I'll be right back. And I feel like Beverly D'Angelo has an abundance of that going on in her life. And she is the smartest character in the movie. She's the one who figures out the lights. She's constantly cleaning up after Clark, trying her hardest to match his vision. So they are truly partners in this, but she's taking his lead.
She makes Clark more likable because we look at her and think, all right, if she's supporting this guy, there must be more than we're seeing.
I just wish at some point we got to see more because I don't understand why they're together. And this happens. We know couples where it's like, really? This makes no sense to me, but it makes sense to them. So congratulations.
Apparently she said she based a lot of Ellen off her mother, who had that sort of like, well, we're in this family, we have to keep together. And a lot of it is just supporting the husband. So that's kind of an aspect she kind of worked into Ellen. But little things like when the lights fail the first time and you can tell she wants him to come inside and she's just like, don't stay out too late. She knows nothing she says is going to bring him in and that he's going to overdo this anyway. But the way she says it, not with this frustration, but this sort of affection.
Oh, it is. It's absolutely like, this is the man I married, and this might not be my favorite aspect of him, but this is very him, and this is the person I love.
Or when he asks again, like, when have I overdone anything? And she just does this litony of, anniversaries.
Because it's everything.
He's trying to like end the conversation, turn off the lights, and of course everything's still sticking to them, but she still keeps going.
It's a great comedic moment, but it says a lot about how well she knows him.
I think one of my favorite moments of her when she's talking with Audrey and Audrey's complaining about the situation and she's frantically looking around the room searching for something. And then we finally find out it's like this hidden pack of cigarettes she has in the fridge. Mm-hmm. She just lights one up and her mother starts, "Are you smoking?" He's like, "No."
It's like she just wants to cope with the stress of the holidays. God damn it, let her have a cigarette.
It's the holidays and we're all miserable.
Yes.
It's like the veneer cracks finally for a second.
She has a couple of moments where you can see she's just had enough.
Yeah.
But she tries to hold it in because she loves Clark and Clark wants this perfect vision as much as I wouldn't say it's killing her, but I think she takes antacids.
Yeah, she must have an ulcer like crazy at this point. When he goes out to chainsaw the second Christmas tree and she's like, "Get back in here." And you just see her fling her cup into the snow and just stalk off. Oh. Or when she figures out what the problem with the lights is, and she has that moment of realization, that little smile goes back.
But she doesn't tell him.
But she doesn't tell him. She lets him have the victory. That's such a sweet moment there.
That was her secret Christmas present. We all have secret Christmas presents.
And like you said, that is what I imagine she's like 365 days of the year, doing these little things to make things work and not telling him that she's the one who's actually doing some of this to make it all okay.
So she's either preserving his childlike wonder or she's saving herself from grief. It's one or the other.
Either way, I think she's sort of feeding the Clark Griswold ego, which is dangerous.
Yes.
D'Angelo commented that she liked working with Chevy Chase, but that doing these movies would be like a family reunion where you're really happy to see somebody, and by the end of the shoot, they're kind of ready to kill each other.
Oh, so it's exactly like the movie then, right?
But she still really enjoyed doing them. She'd do 2 more with him. Yeah, well, one was more of a cameo appearance in the reboot one that they did with Ed Helms, but Vegas Vacation after this. Apparently also, the decision for her to grab Clark's crotch during the police raid was her idea. And
hilarious.
It's such a weird thing for years. I'm like, wait, is she doing what I think she's doing?
But the best part of that isn't that she's grabbing his junk, but that she shakes hands and then puts her hand right back on the junk. I mean, that's so funny. It's so funny. She has a background in music. She starred or co-starred in the musical Hair in the 70s. So when we hear her singing in the beginning of the movie, she's a trained singer.
I did not realize that.
Yeah.
And not to be weird, but looking at Beverly D'Angelo in this movie, the idea that Clark would want to cheat on his wife with anybody is insane to me because she is just fantastic looking in this. This is like her best look, I think.
Well, yeah, she looks great, but I think the movie is taking a more realistic look at long-term marriage, if that makes sense, because humans don't shut off like, hey, that guy looks good. People don't shut that off after marriage. You don't all of a sudden become blind to the rest of the world.
That is very true.
So while I found it and still find it really gross the way he's so obvious in the department store, and even the clerk knows he's being really obvious and gross, but she's doing that whole, I'm in customer service. I need this sale. I'm going to I know he's being lecherous, but let's see if he'll buy something because this is my job.
And it works because he does.
And it does. And as much as when I was a lot younger, I felt like his whole daydream sequence where it goes from this fun family pool party to sexy pool party. I found that so gross as a kid, but this is in his head. This is fantasy. He's not acting on it. No harm, no foul.
Not in this movie, at least.
Well, right. And I'm taking this movie as it is outside the other films, again, because I have not seen them.
So let's move on to the kids. Now, it's a weird phenomenon in these films that, for the most part, the kids are recast in every film. And I think this is the one where both Audrey and Russ actually seem like normal kids for the most part.
They do.
In the other ones, they're mostly normal, but they have some weird, goofy bits too. And the way that Juliette Lewis and Johnny Galecki play them, they both come across as sharp and a lot more aware of what's happening with their dad.
I'm imagining that the characters were portrayed as younger before this.
It's weird because it flips, because it used to be that Russ was the older one and Audrey was younger. And like in European Vacation, he's maybe 15 or 16. And I think she's like 14 or 15. And then that kind of flips in this one and she's older.
So they act like people who have grown up with this guy and have taken on the traits of their mother. You notice that most of the time the kids are talking either through their mother, like their mom is relaying information, or they're talking to their father in a way mom does, like placating him, knowing when to back off.
So let's start with Audrey. This is one of Juliette Lewis's first big movies. I mean, a couple of years later, she'd do Cape Fear, and then she'd be everywhere in the 90s. And I think it's interesting that most of her career in the 90s, she's kind of playing these loopy sort of woman-child characters who are a little out there. And here she actually is smart and kind of sarcastic and funny. And I think it's really interesting to see her play that.
I love how whiny she is. She's absolutely a teenager. She wants her own space. She's mad at getting kicked out of her space. She doesn't want family there. Chances are Christmas, she could just go with her presents and go back to her room. There's an entire character that wasn't written, but you can see by the way Juliette Lewis creates the character.
And how much she hates her brother. She does not want to have anything to do with him, really.
When you have a little brother and you're a teenager, do you really want to be around your little brother?
Okay, that's fair.
Yeah, that's why I feel like they are very well-rounded kid characters. She's the right whiny and angsty age, and you can tell from his room he's trapped in that moment between childhood and being a teenager.
But she's also not one note in that during the Christmas lights scene, she can go from complaining about having to be standing on the front lawn staring at her house and hoping her friends don't see it. And then as soon as it doesn't work and the grandparents are making fun of Clark, she jumps to his defense.
Right. I do want to argue a little point with the not wanting my classmates to see me or my friends to see me. A lot of being a teenager is being very, very selfish. Like, you look at yourself and you are the only thing that matters through those years. She might not want people to see her like that, but she absolutely does. Because if her friends drive by and they see her in her robe and her pajamas in front of the lights, she has a story to tell. She's the center of attention. It might be an embarrassing story, but if it's your friends, you're telling that embarrassing story.
So that's the thing. I wonder how many times she's had embarrassing situations caused by her dad that she'd have to explain to friends. Like, maybe like, I don't even want friends over the house because God knows what my dad is going to do.
Right.
But just that moment of, you know, he worked really hard on it when she's defending him to the grandmother. I just thought, oh, that's such a nice, quick turnaround that down deep, she does respect what he tried to do for them.
Or at least she wants to just defend her dad.
Yeah.
This is my dad. What is your problem?
Even to the point of being like, the house still looks really nice even though the lights aren't working. She wants him to feel better about it.
Because she took on a lot of the traits her mom displays. Make him feel better. I do feel like so much of their relationship with Clark is tiptoeing. It could get a lot worse if you act a certain way, and they're not. You can tell how much the entire family, no, I take that back, his immediate family, so his children and his wife are just tiptoeing around this time bomb.
I do feel like in their case, a lot of it is love and care for him and not just like, what's he going to do if he freaks out? Although that certainly comes into play later in this movie.
I agree, but I think they want his happiness and they want him to not explode at the same time.
And they're operating under the assumption that all this stuff he's doing is for them, even though it really does seem like it's more for him. So then there's Johnny Galecki as Russ Griswold. This was the other Christmas movie he was in that year because he was also in Prancer as the older brother. Of course, he'd go on to this huge career in TV on Big Bang Theory and Roseanne. And he was new to comedy, so apparently Chevy Chase would be off camera a lot of times giving him little cues in terms of timing or suggest little bits of business for him to do. Like when Clark wants him to help with the lights, like looking at his watch going, oh, look at the time. I got to go do homework and do that. That's a very Chevy Chase sort of comedy routine thing that he used to do.
Yeah, and I could be wrong, but in that moment, I don't think he's even wearing a watch.
He's not. That's
right.
Part of the joke is
right.
that Chase would do all the time. Yeah. And like you were saying, he has that mother thing of supporting him, but also trying to steer him a little away from things.
Well, there's this moment, too, where he tries to talk to his dad toward the end, and then he realizes, no, this is a crucial moment. If I don't back off, this is going to go really, really badly. And it's played for laughs, and it is funny, but it's also a little frightening.
Or again, when the lights fail and he's like, oh, it's a good try, Dad. Almost like, you tried, it didn't work. Let's move on from this.
It's definitely let's move on. It's like, before this gets worse and you get worked up, you did your best. Great job. Let's go inside.
One little bit of Galecki's performance I think is absolutely brilliant is that scene in the department store. He's looking around for his dad, sees him at the lingerie counter, and he can just see in Galecki's eyes this look of, oh, here we go again. That he's seen this before, he knows exactly what it is. And then he just kind of sidles up sideways and waits till his dad notices him flirting with this woman. It's such a great little moment on his part.
I love it because it also, I mean, how many of us did embarrass our parents in public? And that's what's going on here. If I walk up to my dad being creepy, this is going to be funny.
And he doesn't do like a gotcha. He's just like, yeah, well, you really can't see the lines, Dad.
Yeah, exactly.
Waiting to see how long it takes for him to notice.
Plus, I do wonder how much of that is Rusty taking on some of the behaviors of Clark. Like, yes, let me objectify this salesperson.
He does have this attractive woman showing her butt cheek right in front of him. So, yeah, I mean, and he's a teenage,
and he's a
near teen kid. So, yeah.
And doesn't he have ladies all over his wall?
Yeah,
somewhere
he has
like
the poster on the ceiling.
Right.
Yeah. He has all these like dinosaur and very kid-like posters everywhere, but the model is up on top where maybe the parents wouldn't quite see it.
But also, as I was saying, he's trapped in that moment where childhood's ending. You still have some of those things you're holding on to, or your parents are still buying for you. Things that you might be embarrassed to still be playing with, but your sexuality is awakening. So you're almost at that point where you're leaving that part of your life behind.
And then there are other moments like when they're unveiling the Griswold family Christmas tree and he's about to cut the ropes off it, where Rusty almost has this look of pride, like, yeah, here we go. This is going to be great. A moment before he cuts the ropes and all the branches go everywhere and smash the windows. Like, there's still a little of that he appreciates his dad's showmanship kind of vibe to him.
You know, this is one of those films that is perfectly cast across the board.
I agree. Yeah, there's not a single performance here that I'm like, oh, they got the wrong actor.
Right.
Everyone's
no one's
great.
being lazy. Everyone's on point. Everybody's a well-rounded character, even when the camera isn't directly focused on them.
And that's the thing. When Galecki said he hadn't really done comedy, I wouldn't know it looking at his performance here.
I wouldn't
He really
either.
seems to just have it down. Oh, I also got to note that great moment at the end when the boss comes in and Clark is trying to explain how terrible it is. And Russ just suddenly steps on and goes, it sucks. It's like, again, that moment of supporting his dad and really feeling for what he's gone through.
Yes, I also think some of that is, I want a pool.
All right, that's valid too. Okay, let's talk about the other big role for this movie. Randy Quaid as Cousin Eddie. I'm going to say something a little controversial here. I think there's just a tiny bit too much of Eddie in the film.
That is controversial.
I think Eddie is such a strong character, and Quaid is brilliant, and he's really funny, that I think he almost threatens to overwhelm things by the end of the movie.
Where do you think he started being too much?
Well, it's not Quaid's fault because it's in the script, but I think a lot of times there are scenes where they feel like Eddie has to put another little beat on the end of a scene where I feel like, oh, you don't need that. Like the sledding scene where Clark goes down the hill, goes through all these parking lots, goes into the deposit box outside of Walmart. And that's a funny little end to the scene, but we have to cut back to Eddie on the hill going, bingo. And I just thought, oh, you didn't need that there.
I see what you mean.
There are a lot of little things like that. And part of it is that Quaid is just so in the character, he can kind of eat up the background of a scene, even if he's not the focus.
He did. I didn't have a problem with it because it felt, again, real. I mean, I personally haven't had experience with a relative quite as repugnant. Right. But yeah, there are relatives that embarrass you just to be around, even if it's in private, and they're too much. And we've been to parties with people who have been too much.
Oh, yeah.
Right. So they're real people. And I agree, he's very strong. There's a lot of him. I would have cut a moment here or there, and I think that's what you're suggesting.
I think, yeah.
Maybe like 30 seconds worth of cut across the board.
Yeah, not a ton out, but there's just a little too much. See, when he was in the first Vacation, he's in like 3 or 4 scenes, and it's maybe like 10, 15 minutes of the movie, but he kind of leaves this impact over it. It's like the pug from Men in Black. The first movie, he has one really funny scene, and then the second movie, the pug's all over that movie, and it's like, wow, that's way too much.
I wonder if this isn't the fan favorite character problem, where a character becomes really popular. They're very bit characters. So the next time, let's bring this really popular character back and give him more lines and more to do.
I think that's exactly the problem, to the point where he'd get his own movie that's a direct sequel to this down the road, where it was kind of a disaster. And again, I'm not saying anything wrong with his performance. Quaid, despite his personal weird behavior over the past few years and bizarre politics.
Couple of years. But yeah, despite his personal life, he was perfectly cast.
Yeah. I mean, he's a great dramatic actor. He's a great comedic actor. And he really makes this role his own. And a lot of his weird little tics and mannerisms that he adds in, like that weird clicking noise he does with his tongue, which apparently he was inspired by some salesman he knew in Texas who used to do that. And it feels just right. Or one of the biggest laughs in the movie for me, when he's looking at that little candle-powered carousel thing, the wooden one in the room, and it just like flicks it and the whole thing breaks and he just walks on. And that's very Eddie, just like cause a mess, walk on, move on to something else, leave somebody else to clean it up.
Shitter's full.
Yeah.
Exactly. Let's put this in the municipal water.
The other amazing scene. The switch from Merry Christmas, shitter's full, and to him there's no problem with putting those two sentiments together in the same thought.
And Clark's embarrassed. It's in his neighborhood in public. So this is, again, something that is sullying his attempted illusion of how perfect his family is.
And at the same time, he doesn't like put his foot down and tell him to get out. He can't do that.
No, because he's family. He's just going to be mortified and hope that it goes away.
And little things with his wardrobe. He has the most disgusting wardrobe I've ever seen in a movie, and it's so amazing. The little fake dickie under his sweater. It's so obvious you can see through it. Or that bizarre sort of denim suit, leisure suit he's wearing.
Almost a denim tuxedo, just barely. I can't tell if his shirt is made of denim, but it is certainly the same color as the rest of his suit.
It has like butterflies on it.
It does.
It's the weirdest.
And the butterflies are upside down from what I'd seen.
He has another one when he first shows up with that hat, and he has like this weird dairy cow shirt on that looks like it belongs to some business. It's just weird stuff like that. And I heard somewhere, I think it might have been in the commentary, that for at least one scene, Quaid like stuck a water bottle down his pants so he'd be properly bulging for one scene. It just looked even more disgusting. So, I mean, it's a giant broad performance, and it is really funny. I just feel like it. I'll put it this way. I think if like Mae Questel as Aunt Bethany was in more of the movie, it would be the same thing. That it would be a little too much. So.
I mean, I know we'll get to her, but she is a one gag character. It's just that gag is so brilliant. They can bring
good at it.
Right, that they can bring it back 2 or 3 times without it feeling old.
Yeah. So alongside Eddie, we have Miriam Flynn as Aunt Catherine. And I love this character because She actually, for the most part, seems to act kind of normal. She's a slightly loopy aunt that you might have. It's the fact that she's with Eddie that makes you wonder, what the hell is wrong with this woman?
Yes, but she supports him the same way that Ellen supports Clark. I'm behind your schemes. We're going to go with it. And she cares. She really, really cares. She's devastated that the turkey has been decimated. I mean, I don't even know what to say or how she did what she did to this turkey.
Kind of
it is amazing, but she cares deeply that she has not contributed in a positive way to this feast, or rather this entire holiday. I think more than any other character, she's very aware of her impoverishment, and that in this case, it's true. She is impoverished, but she's still trying so hard to contribute where she can, and it's devastating when she can't.
I also feel like there's almost like this fragility to her that maybe she's the type of person who makes mistakes like that, and Eddie is so blasé and doesn't notice them that it's really nice. That I mean, he doesn't criticize her. When that happens, he's just like, why are you crying? He doesn't get it.
Right.
And maybe that's part of the appeal, that there's that comfort that he is also supportive just because he doesn't know any better if she does something wrong. But I love her performance. I didn't realize that Flynn does all sorts of like voice acting in tons and tons of different movies.
That doesn't surprise me.
In like the Land Before Time movies, she's Grandma Longneck, and she was in I think like 9 of them. Here's a funny thing. She's the voice of Tasmanian Devil's mom in Tasmania, and we got Tasmanian Devil stuff throughout this movie, like the mug that Clark is drinking out of.
Right.
So.
Which just reminded me, during that period of time, the Warner Brothers store, where you could buy all of those character mugs and cells of animation.
My brother used to get the catalogs. I used to love looking through those, especially when they had their Batman section. But I just think she's great in this. And one detail that she pointed out in the commentary I would never have noticed is that during one scene, that, Shitter's Full scene, she can be seen in the background, like trying to deal with the kids around the table wearing a waitress uniform.
Yes, and they both have this appearance. I forgot to mention that Eddie's leisure suit is from the 70s. It has a 70s cut, and she's wearing an old waitress outfit that she considers fancy, or at least it's as fancy as she has. And the way their children are dressed as well, you can see this is piecemeal from Goodwill, but it's also Goodwill outfits that have not been changed. They're off the rack. However quality it came to them, it still is.
They look like characters from like a Mad Max apocalypse where they just find something and be like, good enough. And
yes.
then you work it into their outfit or their life or whatever.
Yes.
Yeah. They'd probably do really good in the post-apocalypse.
And you can imagine maybe she had been a waitress at some point, and this was just the fanciest dress she has hanging around.
Let's move on to the grandparents. First of all, John Randolph as Clark Griswold Sr. I really love this character. He's kind of the doddering, not quite there, but really sweet grandpa.
Yeah.
He's so good at that. He gets, I think, one of the sweetest scenes of the movie where he has to go to Clark and admit, you screwed it up. It's okay. It happens. And, it happened to me, and admits that basically he got through Christmas because he had alcohol and was drunk for most of the time.
Right.
Which is both kind of scary, but also kind of sweet that he has to finally admit this.
But admitting it to the person who just days before watched all of these videos of what he had thought were perfect Christmases, to come to the realization that, well, it was perfect for me, but for my dad, he went through exactly what I'm going through. All of a sudden, this is the Christmas experience as an adult. This is perfect.
And that moment where it's like, I'm not going to read The Night Before Christmas. It's your house. I'm retiring. It's your job, which is both sweet in that he's recognizing Clark's sort of authority on this holiday. It's like, this is your holiday. You should do it. But also I feel like it's like, I'm free of having to do this.
Yes.
I'm free of having to be the guy who makes Christmas work. You can do it.
Yes, he has passed on the burden. He doesn't want it anymore. He just wants to sit and take a nap.
And as somebody who, that was our family tradition, we'd do the whole night before Christmas on Christmas Eve. Every year, my dad would come over and we'd all sit there together.
All we did was fight.
that scene where he's reading it and the whole family, there's finally this moment of peace where they're all smiles and it's all kind of nice and sweet. That happened every Christmas Eve in my household. And
wow.
It was really nice. And that's one of the reasons I love that scene. Randolph might look familiar from Seconds. He is the pre-Rock Hudson version of the main character in that movie. Unfortunately, he was like blacklisted for a couple of years, but when he finally came back with seconds and a bunch of other movies, he was one of the chiefs of police in Serpico. He was the captain of the boat in King Kong, the 76 remake. Lots of great stuff. He had a great career. He's just a really wonderful presence in this movie. Alongside him, there's Diane Ladd as Nora Griswold. And this was right before Ladd had a huge career boost where she had 2 Oscar nominations in a row for supporting actress for Wild at Heart and Rambling Rose, both alongside her daughter, Laura Dern. And when it came to Rambling Rose, she was actually up against Juliette Lewis. And they both lost to Mercedes Ruehl for Fisher King. She's also sweet and nice, but also you can see kind of the hypochondriac. So she walks in. You see this mole? Look at this mole. Is this changing color? I love that weird thing she does with Clark on entering there. It's like this routine they do where she's like checking his eyes, checking his nose, checking his mouth, and doing it to this sort of childhood rhyme.
Yeah.
You get the sense this is exactly what she does whenever she sees him and that she used to do it for him as a kid.
One of the character moments I love for her, after the lights have not gone on, she comforts him. She comforts her child. She sees in this moment he's suffering, but I believe that she's much like Beverly D'Angelo in that she gets this because her husband is like this. And now her child is like this. So we can assume going forward that Rusty is going to be like this.
Unfortunately, yeah. That's actually what the reboot Vacation movie is about.
Oh my goodness.
What she says in that scene, though, that like, I can picture in my mind Clark and it's beautiful. It's such a mom thing to say.
It is.
And it's so nice and sweet.
It's the participation prize.
Exactly. I love her reaction in the squirrel scene where it's just like she faints and then it's just like playing dead on the floor.
Yes.
The whole scene.
Is it gone?
Next, there's E.G. Marshall as Art Smith. And when I first saw this when I was younger, I had a bit of a problem because I couldn't look at E.G. Marshall and not see Upson Pratt from Creepshow. So immediately I'm like, ugh. And while he's not as evil in this, he is still kind of mean-spirited and nasty, but he's so good at it. It's nice to see Marshall play comedy. Like that moment with the lights where he's just like, those little lights aren't twinkling, Clark. Like he can't let Clark have this moment of victory.
No, he doesn't want him to be victorious. I imagine, and again, all of these characters have backstory that is unwritten and unsaid. Love it. You can imagine that he and his wife were really dead set against Ellen marrying Clark. They do not like this man. They have never liked this man. And any failure will be picked up and commented upon.
Yeah.
It was an ugly tree anyway.
Did a lot of work. So do washing machines. Yeah.
Right.
Any second he has to put Clark down. Alongside him, we have Doris Roberts as Frances Smith, Ellen's mother. I can't look at her and not see Everybody Loves Raymond and her character in that and kind of draw some of that character into this role.
She has this wonderful moment that I find really tacky and embarrassing. Like I get passive embarrassment for Clark in this moment where after the lights fail to turn on, she laughs. There's like this dead silence. And then she just laughs and has an alcoholic hiccup. And that's like, oh, you are terrible.
And follows it up with that, I hope you kids realize what a waste of time this was.
Yes.
It's like, oh, it's so cruel.
Like this embarrass the father because you don't like that your child married him.
And then when the lights go on and Clark comes over and gives her a hug, that's sort of like frozen animal in danger pose. She does like, no, I hope it enhances your holidays. And she finds it's really beautiful. Like, please let go of me if I say the right thing.
Yes, it has nothing to do with wanting to give him a compliment and all about wanting to escape his touch.
Yeah.
This is how much she does not like this man.
I'll say what I'm supposed to say. Can we move on, please?
Yes. It's like when a coworker walks by you and just pats you on the shoulder or calls you dear and you're like, this is not a person I ever wanted this close to me. We all have that one coworker.
Oh, yeah. Okay, next, Julia Louis-Dreyfus and Nicholas Guest playing the neighbors, Margot and Todd Chester.
Could you imagine this movie from their perspective, them as the main characters and their neighbors as these nightmare?
I totally can. It's almost like Christmas with the Cranks in a way.
It is.
We're not going to put up lights or trees or anything like that. And that's the weird thing I find with their characters is that they're laughing at Clark. We as the audience members are supposed to laugh at Clark, but at the same time, we're supposed to like Clark. So they're made as much disgusting yuppies as possible so we can also kind of side with Clark and enjoy when he does these horrible things that affect them.
And their house is bigger and more modern, and they're younger and
it's characterless and just kind of soulless.
Right. And they put him down to his face. They put him down passively. They hate him as neighbors. Justifiably at some points hate him as a neighbor, like justified. You can imagine in the 80s, they got everything they own from Sharper Image. There's that, oh God, the 80s idea of wealth is white.
Yes.
And I don't mean just white people, but white interiors, white rugs.
Sterile looking, yeah.
Yes, definitely sterile looking. We see it also in Scrooged in the future where Claire is upper middle class, doesn't care about anybody. It's all white.
And even Frank's office in that movie is very gray and not much decoration to it that has any kind of warmth to it.
Right.
And I love that we get that great contrast between the Griswold house that has all these old family photos and random pictures and knickknacks and things, and theirs where it all just feels like you went into a department store and this is the display room.
Yeah, but a moment that I love in Julia Louis-Dreyfus's character, Margot, when she asks her husband, like, do you maybe think we should have gotten a Christmas tree? Do you regret that? And you can tell within her there's more going on than just this yuppie exterior. She's living a life that isn't quite what she wants it to be either. It's a perfect veneer, much like Clark's. They have very different ideas of what perfection is. But she's able to say, well, maybe this isn't perfect. And that's Clark can't say maybe it's perfect. Maybe
funny.
It's not perfect.
I actually read that differently as everybody else has them. Maybe it's kind of fashionable for us to have a Christmas tree and celebrate. Shouldn't we do that too?
Oh, I heard that as regret.
Interesting. I don't know. I just saw it as this, maybe this is the popular thing. What a score to get her this early in her career. She had just been on Saturday Night Live, but this was, of course, just before Seinfeld and before Veep. And oh my God, she's so great for the small role.
She definitely had an SNL role, if you know what I mean. Like, if you're not starring as the SNL character, you're the side character. But she definitely has that SNL bit role where you're like, hey, she was on that show and so is he.
Yeah, not knowing what she was going to go on to in the next few years.
Right.
Nicholas Guest, apparently he's Christopher Guest's brother, and I was trying to figure out where I know him from, and he's in Star Trek 2. He's one of the Starfleet cadets who has that, shields collapsing, Captain line, early on in the Kobayashi Maru simulation.
Nice.
And he has a couple scenes when Khan attacks where he's just sitting at his defense console where the phasers are, just looking sad, like, oh, it's all broken.
Aw.
Apparently he had a big voiceover career too. He was in Paranorman, Frozen, Big Hero 6 doing a lot of background voices.
In this movie, though, he's very unlikable, but also bland.
It's funny because when we first meet them, they make a snide comment to themselves, okay, and he makes kind of an innocent joke to Clark about, oh, gonna get that in the living room? And that's when Clark does that, bend over, I'll show you where. It's almost like
it comes out of nowhere, almost, the escalation.
Yeah, he doesn't start off necessarily overtly mean to Clark, and Clark responds like that. You start to wonder if maybe this is another reason why they don't like him. There was a little bit more in the screenplay that would have made them even more cliche, where they campaigned to not have kids and old people in the neighborhood.
Oh, I think that would have gone too far and also brought them too far into the story.
And also made them a little too cartoony. Because here you can kind of imagine that, yes, they're kind of the typical yuppies, but maybe they're not exactly as one-dimensional as they seem. Now, we move on to William Hickey as Uncle Lewis. And man, William Hickey is so good at these kind of nasty, mean-spirited roles. He is great. I love how much of his role is yelling at Aunt Bethany. It's saying something louder so she'll hear it.
Because she can't hear anything. And he knows her well enough to be like, the blessing, to know oh, she's mishearing this. Let's let her know because no one else is going to really speak to her in the way she can hear.
And for some reason pointing to his teeth, look at my lips, the blessing.
Yeah.
He's also just so sardonic and mean. I almost feel like he's just oh God, I'm still alive. Well, I'm not happy about it and I'm going to make sure nobody else is happy about it.
I don't know. See, I wish he was my grandfather. Of course, I enjoy caustic people. I find them fascinating and fun. In small doses, obviously. I'm not going to marry somebody who's that mean all the time. But Yeah, I enjoyed his character, the stogie, the fact that he's set on fire twice. Like,
and brushes it off like nothing.
yeah, like, no, this doesn't matter. I've been through worse, smokes a cigar.
The stogie literally seems to be the only thing he cares about in the whole movie and actually likes. Everything else is just an annoyance. And
even his wife, and I agree, even though he knows her, his wife is an annoyance.
We even see in like the Clark's 8mm home films, Clark reaching into a trunk to reach for a present, he slaps Clark's hand away like, no, get out of there. He's always been this mean. Apparently that scene with the squirrel running around where he's in the chair half asleep, Hickey would actually just sit in that chair and nap. And Chechik thinks at least one of the shots in the movie of him napping might actually be Hickey asleep, which is a little scary because he still has the cigar in frame. But there's one moment early in that scene where he kind of like half wakes up like, that I think actually might have been Hickey asleep because it looks like he's just waking up from a nap.
But people of that era would often, in the 80s, I mean, he's what? Let's just say he's 70. The dangers of smoking while sleeping didn't quite connect as well as they do now, I would think. I do remember my grandmother falling asleep with a cigarette in her hand more times than I'd care to count. And as an adult, I'm like, wow, that's horrific. As a child, I found it hilarious.
The way he just casually flings a match anywhere, almost like with a flourish, especially in that last scene.
Well, for him, it's like, I don't care what happens. The world's going to shit anyway. Who cares if it explodes? Who cares if my back's on fire? And my favorite.
Oh, God. Mae Questel as Aunt Bethany. Questel was actually the voice of Betty Boop, as we discussed in our Roger Rabbit episode, and still could do the voice even that late because she did it in Roger Rabbit perfectly.
Right.
And the voice of Olive Oyl. So just an amazing voice career there. This turned out to be her last role, but man, what a role to go out on. Yes, the character is sort of this stereotype of old people, but she's so delightful and sweet, and she gives it such enthusiasm. It's so cute.
She is just as earnest as Clark is, and her world is perfect because she's seeing through a mental lens that is quite possibly dementia. And dementia, honestly, it can be really scary to see. It can be scary for the person. But at least the time she spends with her family in this moment, she's in a very happy place. And it's her own little world, just like Clark's own little world. She has a much more interesting story to me because I want to see exactly what she thinks she's doing. Like, is it moment to moment where she's like, no, we're in a ball game? Or is it that, I don't know, because now as I'm thinking about it, she does shift. But every time she shifts, it's a happy thing.
That's the thing. She always seems to find every moment as really something new and exciting.
Yes.
Like something incredible is going on. She's just so excited to be there.
Yes.
And I think that's so adorable. And
she
so
is adorable.
Sweet. The moment where she has to give grace and she doesn't understand. And what she does there, it's like she just kind of falls back on something she knows to say. But she says it with such sincerity that everyone kind of has to go along with it. Yeah,
not just that moment, but also the moment when she's singing the Star Spangled Banner. Like, of course, I'm seeing fireworks. This must be the 4th of July. But wait, no, it's a ball game.
So then when something happens where she's actually right, like when she first hears the squirrel and Lewis makes some kind of crack about, you wouldn't hear a dump truck going through a nitroglycerin plant. She's like, no, I hear it. And she's actually right. It's like this moment of clarity in her character all of a sudden for this brief second.
And I think that's because it's so absurd. It's so bizarre. It's out of place. So she, who is out of place, I mean, she's out of place definitely mentally, she can hear it and she believes it.
And I love that when that squirrel's running around, neither of them, Lewis or Bethany, move at all.
I love it. She's knitting. She doesn't care.
She's fine. There was a whole extra beat in the script where, I don't know if they couldn't use it for something we'll discuss later, or they just decided to get rid of it, where the squirrel would actually kind of climb up her skirt. And she's just like nonchalantly like, I need a new girdle. This is too tight.
Oh, yeah. I don't think I would have liked that.
No, I'm glad
they
cut that out. That's just kind of gross.
It's not the gross factor more than it is just, it doesn't seem in her character. And I think it would have stopped the film. Like, it feels like your last beat in the film. Like, oh, I think my girdle's too tight. And then there's just a squirrel in her dress. You can't move forward from that. It would have to cut scene. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah,
like, that's not the right beat.
I agree. It feels like tonally for me, it would be a little too far out there.
It's a little out of place.
It's like a Farrelly Brothers gag or something.
Yes, yeah.
A couple I got to bring up. He doesn't really get to do much, but there's also Cody Berger as Rocky Johnson. Eddie and
he does
Catherine's
nothing.
son. He just kind of ends up being kind of gross. But
He exists.
Yeah.
And he would have, the actor at that time would have made a fantastic Pugsley.
Oh, absolutely.
But as a character, he just exists to be silent. And like you can imagine in about 5 or 6 years, he's going to be the creepy cousin in the corner.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, he doesn't get much to do in terms of comedy. Like most of the things that apparently are going on with him are related to the audience through Ruby Sue. So we don't even get to hear him say them.
Ruby Sue, who is no more than 6 or 8.
Yeah, Ellen Hamilton Latson is Ruby Sue, who might look familiar from Fatal Attraction. She is Michael Douglas and Ann Archer's daughter in that one, the one who gets kidnapped in the late part of that movie. I really like her scene with Clark, but I'm distracted by how bad that wig is.
I love how bad that wig is. The idea that this child has gone unwashed and uncared for so long that her hair has a wiry thickness to it. And you know, that wig, whoever the wig master was for this movie, really needed to rethink their career. I agree. It's a terrible wig, but it worked for me.
Well, especially because when they first show up outside, when the lights go on, I can't tell if it's real hair and she cut it and they had to replace it with a wig, or if it's just a better wig, but it looks so much better in that scene compared to that scene indoors. If you look at when she walks up, her hair, she has a hat on and it helps, but her hair looks so much better.
Right.
That wig is terrible. But she is really great. I love her bizarre way of speaking that I didn't quite grasp the first time. Like when she's talking about Rocky, his is afraid that Santa's not going to come, that she has this, I haven't really gotten a lot of schooling kind of way of speaking.
Right. And you can imagine they've been on the road for a long time. Education might not be the highest priority because when you're that impoverished, survival is your first go-to.
And you can tell that she doesn't particularly like that way of living. And she's, if not fed up with it, she likes the idea of this nice, warm home life that the Griswolds have that she hasn't been able to enjoy.
Right. And she's actually showing Clark how much he does have. And he tries to share what he has with her as much as he's able to, because he is a very selfish character.
I do want to bring up also Brian Doyle Murray playing Mr. Shirley, Clark's boss. He actually was a member of National Lampoon and on the radio show for a while. And when he stepped away, I introduced, hey, I have this brother. He might be good at it, and helped get Bill Murray into the business, obviously.
Oh, interesting.
And he was in the first Vacation movie playing the guy who runs the campground in that movie. And he's so good at these weird little gruff parts. I love how completely out of touch with his employees he is, not just in terms of like not knowing their names, but any kind of sentiment towards them. That moment when Clark thanks him for the Christmas card, and there's this look of confusion on his face, like, wait, we send Christmas cards to people? And the guys be like, corporate card, sir. Mm-hmm. And then he just gives him this look like, why'd you say that in front of him and embarrass me?
Well, I think it was not just that, but we're wasting money on corporate cards. I love the gag that he can never remember Clark's name, and then he calls him all of these different names because who cares? He's just another body.
And the guy next to Clark is like introducing himself to the boss, like, I'm Bill, sir. And he thinks he's talking about Clark because then he calls Clark Bill. And Clark has to be like, Clark.
Yeah, sure.
Or the things he starts calling like Grisball, Greaseball.
Mm-hmm. Grisman, I think, is what the Jelly of the Month Club was.
The delivery guy?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure it was Grisman.
Well, I like the delivery guy doesn't seem to know. He's just like, Clark W. Grisman.
Grisman.
Or even when he has his Scrooge moment and comes around, it's people who make the difference. Little people like you, Clark.
Yes.
He still can't like just actually be a nice person about it. There's still this upper crust quality. I get the sense that the only reason he didn't eliminate the bonuses before is maybe he didn't even know about them or didn't bother to know about them. And once he found out, then he was like, I'll get rid of the bonus.
Mm-hmm.
I also want to mention his wife in the movie, who is played by Natalia Nagulich.
My goodness.
The thing is, I can't look at her and not see her from Star Trek The Next Generation, where she sees Admiral Nechayev, the one who's always giving Picard problems until he like finally gives her tea and finally gets this friendly relationship going with her.
I've been able to separate the two.
The Star Trek character, I can't do it.
But I love that her character stays in her dressing gown, but throws on this giant fur coat. And I think she puts on earrings, and she's definitely making up her face in the cop car. She's all about the illusion as well. She's going to have the illusion of wealth but she's still harried enough to not change her clothes.
See, I almost thought that was on purpose because she's like, I look so good in this nightgown. I want to show it off to the cops, but make it
entirely
look like
possible.
that I'm not.
That could be very true.
But it is interesting that she's at least nice enough to, when she hears about the whole eliminating the bonus plan, she's like, how could you?
Yeah.
Unless that's just, I'm in front of people who would have been getting this bonus. I should make it look like I care.
Again, another character who you could write an entire backstory for without her actually saying it or it being written in the script. I can imagine that she comes generationally from money and that charity is very important to her because, rich people like to feel as if they are giving back to the little people. And
the wee little people.
Yes, the little people who need money to be told how little they are. You get what I mean.
Yeah.
It's charitable contributions, according to her, not thanking your workers for working so hard during the year to make you money. It's an act of charity.
And also, wow, we'll look really terrible if you do this.
Yes, how low could you be to take away bonuses and for this to be revealed in front of the police, who they probably are in with monetarily? You can imagine them contributing to the police fund because they show up in force. They get an entire SWAT team to come out and rescue this guy.
And a guy who looks like he might be the commissioner there.
Right,
Yeah.
right. So these people are obviously very entrenched in the community financially.
Also, the scene when she's on the phone to 911 describing Eddie.
He's a bulging beast of a man.
The way she says it, where she doesn't sound like she's really horrified, and it sounds more like somebody who'd be complaining to the manager about somebody.
Oh, see, I always read that as she wishes she had been whisked away by this beast of a man.
Oh, ew.
But you know what I mean? This forceful beast of a man.
Well, you don't think that Brian Doyle Murray can be a forceful beast of a man when he wants to be?
Would he come in and kidnap her?
Okay, probably not. But
there's something going on there for her. The way she delivers the description of this guy.
That is an angle I never considered.
But considering it, can you believe it to be possible?
All right, now I'm picturing her looking at her back pool, picturing Eddie taking off his bathing suit and throwing it at her.
It's the King Kong moment. And she feels as if she got left out.
'Twas Eddie that killed it.
No, she's like, I'm Faye Ray. Come on, I'm glamorous. I'm right here.
Oh, man. This is an angle I never thought of, and I'm not sure if I ever really wanted to think of.
You're welcome. That's what I'm here for.
Okay. A couple other little observations I wanted to make. The pool that he's going to get.
You're still having a moment where you can't stop laughing.
I'm trying to divorce the
moment?
image from my head.
King Kong, giant Eddie climbing up the Empire State Building, swatting away planes, except he'd probably be swatting away flies.
Yeah, in a leisure suit.
Giant flies. Oh, see? Oh, I want that short film.
Oh, God.
Sorry, go ahead.
The pool that Clark is trying to get, I love that when he looks at the plan for it, it looks like there's a little radiation symbol, like there's a fallout shelter underneath it. I feel like that's just such a beautiful 80s touch. That this still idea of, well, maybe we still need a shelter.
Well, there's fear of nuclear power. We're still in the Cold War at that point. So it was very much on the forefront. There's a lot more going on with the nuclear power plant, but if you're near one of those, your target...
Which, I mean, in the 80s with Reagan was still...
Reaganomics.
We were starting to get to Glasnost, but it was still that sense of, the Russians are...
Right.
Something else we didn't discuss, the animated opening to the movie. What do you think of that?
I think it is very of its time. It makes me think of movies like Troop Beverly Hills and also as far back as One Crazy Summer. These animated openings that give you the tone of the movie, but being slightly disconnected from the movie itself. They're usually their own short film ahead. Reminds me a lot of early cinema when they would play a newsreel, a cartoon, and then the feature film. So in this, you get the cartoon short feature and the film.
Yeah, I kind of like that. I was thinking of Honey, I Shrunk the Kids is another one that springs to mind with that.
I'd forgotten about that
and
one.
It's something I kind of miss. It's such a nice, weird little thing. And I was thinking about how we never quite get Clark in a Santa suit. We get him with the beard, looking in the mirror, admiring how he looks. And we get him in the hat and coat, but it's almost like Santa is sort of the Clark of the situation where everything's going wrong and he's just trying to make Christmas work.
Yes.
And I think that's kind of cute. In which case, the rather disaffected looking reindeer could be his family.
I totally agree. And you can tell the reindeer are competent.
They just give this look like, oh, here we go again. Go pick him up. All right, so let's discuss some deleted scenes. There was originally a longer scene at the tree lot where after they find this tree and realize they don't have a saw, they would have gone back to the front where you can see there's sort of a trailer there and gone to the guy and like, hey, can we borrow a saw? And he has to point to the sign that says customers are expected to bring their own saw. And finally, Clark negotiates him to handing him a shovel. And then it would have cut to them with the car on the roof.
It plays too long. It was a good cut.
A lot of places in the script where scenes play too long and the cut is so much better. That cut of Clark's face falling to the car is so much better. And that one was actually filmed because there's like stills of it. And some people claim to have seen it. I don't know if it's one of those cases where they put it back onto it for like network TV or something.
Or people have just imagined.
That's also a possibility, yeah. There was also a scripted scene where we actually would have seen the family shopping while Clark is stuck in the attic. And Clark's parents are talking about buying Rusty a BB gun. They're like, no, Clark would never allow it. You didn't like it when he had one. We'll buy him a manicure kit. And the dad's like, oh, that's a good idea. Or Ellen's parents were going to buy Audrey this really disgusting monogram purse. Again, it's a nice cut because I think it's much better to just stay with Clark in the attic during that whole scene.
I agree, but I also find as just supplementary material, it interesting that Clark's parents are buying things that are illusionary. Like, let's make you a young gentleman with your finely trimmed cuticles. This is all appearance. And the same thing with the purse. Monogrammed purses were and are an indicator of wealth in a way, or at least one of the indicators of perceived wealth. So they're all about that veneer as well.
Which, considering they instilled it into Clark, yeah, that
Right.
makes a lot of sense. Miriam Flynn has commented that originally there was a scene inside the RV between Eddie and Catherine that was cut out, which, given what I said about Eddie's presence in the movie, I think is probably for the best, although I could always actually go for more Catherine in the movie because I think she's really funny. One extra beat that was filmed, because it's in the trailer, is where Rocky worries that Santa won't come after the tree fire, and Uncle Lewis advises him that Santa should stay away from this house. It's a death trap. I always remember that line from the trailer and being surprised it wasn't in the film.
I'm glad it wasn't, because I do like that Rocky is so absent mentally and physically from this movie, and vocally, of course, even more so. I'm not sure he has one line.
I don't know. I not that I can remember.
Yeah. But I like that about his character.
And there's one beat, I don't know if this was filmed, but Chechik has since regretted that there's a post-credits scene from the script that wasn't included where we would have seen Todd and Margot cuddled in bed, recovering from everything that's happened. And Todd is like, it's okay, Christmas is over, he had his Christmas, we're done, nothing can happen to us now. All of a sudden to have the flaming Santa and reindeer crash through the roof into their room.
I think that's funny, but I prefer ending with Clark on his own with a dog just looking at him. He's reminiscing already. He's nostalgic for this Christmas that is still happening, but he's decided it is perfection and this is the memory.
Yeah, I think it is the better note lineup, but I do like that scene. I almost wish they could have worked it in earlier just to have it.
Yeah, I'm not sure how they could have worked it in because the reindeer flying is basically at the end.
The only thing I can think of is just before that moment where we see everybody else partying in the house and Ellen and Clark are outside, like right before that, after play ball, would have been the spot to put it.
I don't know. I think it's a good cut because I like the focus on the family. I also don't like the idea that these characters are saying, well, nothing else can happen to us because they live next to the Griswolds, and I guarantee they have seen more shit go down than they can say.
I guess I kind of like the idea that they actually did make up after everything that happened, and they're still, like Clark and Ellen, trying to keep each other going. Somehow I think that parallel is kind of cute. Some trivia for the movie?
Sure.
So this is the only film in the Vacation series not to include Lindsey Buckingham's song Holiday Road, which I'll admit is the one thing I wish they could have worked it in somewhere because I love that song. It's so catchy.
It could have been a good credit song. I mean, I don't know the song offhand, but it's funny that this one doesn't have a song that says holiday in the title.
They have the Christmas Vacation Mavis staple songs, and since it's already in the opening and the end, yeah, you could have switched one of those.
Right.
Maybe because Holiday Road sounds a lot more like it's about travel, and this is the one that's not about travel. Director Jeremiah Chechik makes a cameo as the face on the People magazine cover that Clark is reading in bed. I love how kind of ominous he looks in that cover.
Yes. What was the title on it?
It was something about the new man in finance or something
Yes.
like that, or the man on Wall Street. Yeah.
Which is amazing that he's reading that because Clark is aspiring to a different pay scale. So he would be reading about people who are achieving that.
The Griswold house itself might look familiar to audiences. It was located on the Warner Brothers backlot on the street known as Blondie Street because it had been used in the Blondie movies. And there's a bunch of houses that you've seen in tons of movies there. This particular one was also used for Wanda's fantasy house in WandaVision and supposedly the Burnham home from American Beauty. The house next doors that the Chesters live in was the Murtaugh house. And we actually discussed that previously in Blue Thunder, where it was the house where the city councilwoman gets murdered. Just a ton of really important films shot there. And just this past year, they bulldozed the entire thing to build new sound stages. So all that film history is just sort of gone, which is a real pity.
It is a pity. Pragmatically, I get it.
I just wish some of it could have been preserved somehow. There are a lot of videos on YouTube. I found one of some guy who went around and filmed every house as much as he could just to get a last shot of it. Mm-hmm. And it was kind of fascinating. Like he went in and he could even find that little window in the attic that Clark sticks his head out of when he's trying to get their attention when he's stuck up there. It was kind of amazing to see. And that house did have the spiral staircase. So I think some of those scenes were actually filmed in the backlot house and then the rest on sets. Along those lines, Clark's childhood home in his Super 8 movies was the house used on the original Bewitched, and it was actually Agatha Harkness's house from WandaVision. And
interesting.
That actually was just a little further down the street past the Chester house.
So I love the connection of the Bewitched house and the WandaVision house, both featuring in this.
Supposedly, after filming wrapped, Beverly D'Angelo quickly stole the family portrait of the Griswolds that you can see hanging on the wall in the background, and she still has it to this day, which I think is really cute. When Clark freaks out the second time after the lights fail and he starts punching the plastic Santa, Chevy Chase actually broke his finger. He had kind of a Viggo Mortensen moment there, but he just kept going with the scene and vented his pain and frustration on the reindeer.
Interesting that I went to Daryl Hannah in Blade Runner. How is she? Would she break her elbow?
Yeah, she chipped her elbow hitting that window. But either way, it's admirable that he kept going. Yeah, and it's one of the funniest scenes in the movie, if not the funniest for me. The squirrel scene had some problems. They spent the lead up to that training a squirrel to do all the stunts they needed, you know, jumping off the tree, jumping on people, running along the table. And the day they were going to shoot the scene, the squirrel passed away of natural causes.
Oh, the poor thing.
Well, I mean,
it trained so hard for no reason.
The trainer was like, you know, they don't live that long. So, but the problem was they still need to shoot. So they had to shoot it with an untrained squirrel, and it caused a lot of problems. And I think that's part of the reason why we get a puppet for a lot more of that scene, just because they couldn't do some of the things they wanted to do. That's why I wonder if that whole thing with it attacking Aunt Bethany was cut out just because they couldn't do it.
I still think it's a great cut.
I agree.
And I'm not sure how much of this is it's how I've always known the movie, but I think the puppet really works.
It adds silly.
Exactly. It adds this slapstick feel to it.
The sight of it on Chevy Chase's back just like is so funny. And I love the fact that when we see the squirrel, he's so cute and that they're all so terrified of this thing. It's so ludicrous. And it kind of goes with like when there's a bat in the house. Bats are cute, but when there's one flying over your head, instinctively I'm just like, ah.
I'm not sure how I would react to a bat flying around because I'm pretty sure I'd be like, oh, a puppy.
See, that's the thing. If I see a bat in the abstract or like in a zoo, I'm like, he's so cute. Bats have gotten into our house. And when they fly over, I'm like, ah, and I freak out a little bit.
I think part of my perceived reaction, I was a vet tech. I've already had a lot of rabies vaccinations and boosters. And so I know that a lot of people are afraid of bats because of rabies. And that fear, it's not on my radar.
It's never been rabies for me. I think it's kind of what's in the movie is that this animal does not belong in this particular setting. And that incongruity is like, no, this is wrong.
That animal also has no desire to be in that situation.
Clearly.
So the best thing you can do is to let it out of the house as best you can. Just let it do what it's going to do. If it decides that your house is now its house, so be it. You have a roommate.
The cat electrocution scene was actually nearly cut from the film due to studio pressure. Thankfully, John Hughes' intervention and the fact that it was the biggest laugh in the test screening for this movie saved it, which
It's funny.
It's gruesome, but it's a funny scene.
It's really, really funny. And the aftermath, the cat char.
It looks like a Looney Tunes
It
cartoon.
does. It does. It's too absurd for that gross realism. Like, this isn't going to be a horror film version of a fried cat. This is going to be a comedy version.
It makes it okay that it's that cartoony and ridiculous.
Yeah, it's okay to laugh at it because it's very much fake.
Yeah. In the end, when the police are raiding the house, the film uses Gene Autry's version of Here Comes Santa Claus. Interestingly enough, Randy Quaid is actually Gene Autry's third cousin. While shooting the scene when Lewis and Bethany enter the house, there was actually an earthquake on set while filming. And supposedly Chevy Chase kind of ushered everybody outside to be safe. For years, people were claiming you could actually see the set shaking in the film. I don't think that's true. I don't think any of that footage.
Use that cut. Yeah.
There's no way they would have, but it is kind of funny. As for the legacy of the movie, a fourth entry in the National Lampoon Vacation series would follow nearly a decade later with Vegas Vacation, which did not have the involvement of John Hughes, and again had different actors playing the Griswold kids. It received pretty bad reviews and was not a success. And then the success of this film led to the direct sequel, made-for-TV movie National Lampoon's Christmas Vacation 2, that brought back Randy Quaid and Miriam Flynn as Eddie and Catherine. This time, Eddie gets fired from his job, and fearing a lawsuit, his company gives him a free vacation to the South Pacific, but the family actually gets shipwrecked. It's mostly notable because it's the only time that they actually brought an actor back to play one of the two kids. Dana Barron, who played Audrey Griswold in the original National Lampoon's Vacation, comes back, and they actually brought back Eric Idle, who plays this cyclist who gets wounded in European Vacation. Otherwise, from what I understand, it's not great. I still haven't seen it. I just feel like it would kind of tarnish the memory of Christmas Vacation.
The premise doesn't sound great.
And again, Eddie is good in medium to small doses. I don't want him as the main character in a film. That's too much to me. There would also be a reboot of the series Vacation with Ed Helms taking over as a grown Rusty that takes his family on a trip, and it would feature appearances by Chase and D'Angelo as Clark and Ellen. I remember we missed that one in the movies. I keep meaning to get to it, but I've heard it's not all that great.
I'm not moved. There's a lot of media to consume, and life is not that long. So
no, it isn't.
There are some movies I can miss.
Maybe someday if I'm really, 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 really bored.
I'd rather watch Metalocalypse for like the 12th time.
And so we shall. Chase, D'Angelo, and Lewis would also appear in a series of Old Navy ads that paid tribute to the film, and then Chase and D'Angelo would do the same again for a Ford commercial that spotlights the house lighting scene. And we've got to talk about the influence of the house lighting scene, and that now it's kind of a common occurrence to see houses that have that many twinkling lights.
Not just that many twinkling lights, but a fake Clark hanging from the gutters.
I was going to bring that up, that case where I think it was a mailman saw that happening and suddenly rushed over, wait, I'll save you, and tries to get a ladder and get the person down, not realizing it's a mannequin, which was so kind of that person. I love that that family tried to hunt him down so they could give him a gift. Okay, here comes the tough questions. What's your favorite scene?
I have trouble with this movie picking a scene because it's more moments from just about every scene. I think, though, my favorite moment is when he's greeting his boss, and his boss wants the rundown on this new product so that he can look impressive in front of shareholders. And Chevy Chase gives this incredible Merry Christmas, Happy New Year. I can't remember.
Kiss my ass.
Kiss his ass. Happy Hanukkah. And I feel that way a lot. I feel like, you know, my contributions in a lot of ways are making other people look better to other people who will then give that person recognition and money. Like, I have no illusions in my place in the world. So I do feel a lot like, kiss his ass, kiss your ass, Happy Hanukkah, fuck off. You don't care that I'm saying this. This makes no difference in your world.
And I like that all of Shirley's underlings are kind of giving him a look as they pass, even before he starts saying weird stuff.
Yeah, but also, they might be the underlings, but they are socially, within business culture, they're socially above him. So the fact that he would even say stuff like that to him is repugnant. Like, oh, you're saying this to me?
It also
You're just a peon.
Kind of suggests that he knows how anonymous he is, that they won't even remember who he is in a few minutes. Yeah.
Yes. You know, some random employee insulted him.
He's Bill.
Yes, he was Bill. Bill's going to get in trouble for all of that.
Poor Bill. For me, I think it's a scene that I similarly relate to, but a very different scene. And it's the scene in the attic with the home movies. because I'm definitely one who is prone to nostalgia and looking back in the past and how wonderful it all was. And it is just such a weirdly cute scene that he's in this terrible situation, stuck freezing, and he finds these films, and it's almost like he kind of forgets for a little bit what his current predicament is, and he just sets it up and he's just enjoying this. And then Ellen opens up the attic and everything falls down, and you can have this really sweet moving moment and then this incredible laugh at the end of it. I absolutely love that scene. Okay, recommendations.
My recommendation, I do have two. Actually, it's one that you mentioned, but I'm going to start with the first one, which is A Christmas Story. It's low-hanging fruit, but I'm going to go for it. It's a character, an adult character, looking back at this Christmas that was both delightful and horrific, and still that nostalgic holding up of a snow globe of his Christmas experience. So I think the connection there is nostalgia. In A Christmas Story, it's seen as a positive, and I think in National Lampoon, it's not necessarily negative, but complicated. And my other one, we mentioned Christmas with the Cranks. This idea that this family every year has the perfect Christmas party for the whole neighborhood. And one year, just 1 year, they are like, fuck it, we're leaving, we're going away on vacation, we're spending all the money we spend, and we're going on vacation. Only to find out how much that party means to their child, to the neighborhood, and then just the chaos of putting it all together and trying to make it work. And obviously the similarities there are clear.
All right, for my two, I'm going to have to go with one that's a holiday movie, but not a Christmas movie, and that's Jodie Foster's Home for the Holidays, starring Holly Hunter, where her character is kind of in the middle of a midlife crisis. She just got fired. She had this awkward kiss with her boss. Her daughter is talking about how she's trying to lose her virginity, and she goes home and spends this holiday with her dysfunctional family and all the resulting chaos that comes about because of that. Hunter's great. Charles Durning has this wonderful part as the dad who just, you get the sense he just wants a nice, calm family gathering, and it all goes astray. And he just has this kind of weariness to him that I think is really sweet. And Robert Downey Jr., this was right before his big career upswing, is so hilarious as the gay brother who has no respect for anything, but you can't help but love him. The other one, and this is going to be a little weird because it is a horror movie, but I do think it relates, is Krampus.
I agree. Absolutely.
In terms of being a movie about family coming together and annoying the piss out of each other at Christmas, that is another one that's one of the best. And I really feel that Toni Collette and Adam Scott's characters have a lot of Clark and Ellen in them and how they're dealing with all this crazy stuff that's happening around them. And again, that idea of this perfect Christmas, where in this case, this family's not even trying anymore. They're just kind of admitting that, oh, we're here, we're having Christmas together, fine, because this is what we're supposed to do.
Ultimately, to be trapped in the purgatory of Christmas.
And the perfect Christmas, yeah.
Yes.
All right. That ends our discussion, but not the conversation. If you'd like to have your say about National Lampoon's Christmas Vacation or feel that we missed something, check out the comments section for this episode on cinemaspection.com and start talking. Email your comments, complaints, questions, and suggestions to cinemaspection@gmail.com. You can also like our Facebook page and follow me on Blue Sky at tluz.bsky.social.
And follow me nowhere because social media can be tiresome.
She leaves no trail.
I do, unfortunately, but not by choice.
You can also check us out on Instagram at CinemaSpection. Our show is available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, and Amazon Music, so if you like what you hear, please subscribe. If you have a moment to spare, please leave us a review as well. We appreciate your feedback, and your reviews help increase our visibility. We'll be back to discuss another movie soon. Until then, thanks for listening, and remember to keep watching closely. There's more to a movie than what's on the screen. With the discussion of a modern Christmas classic. All right, it bums me out to say that a movie from the 80s is modern and realize, okay, maybe it isn't anymore, but I'm sticking in there anyway.
It's it's not contemporary.
Right.
We'll put it in modern art, which I don't even know if modern art went up to 89.
It's a classic to modern audiences.
I don't think it did.
So
it is nostalgia. It's nostalgia for people in their 40s, and it is.
We're still modern.
But it's a movie about nostalgia, so it's I guess Inception.
Anyway, it's National Lampoon's Christmas Vacation from 1989. I'm going to leave that whole thing in there.
Why?
Because it's funny.